Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks, where kindred souls gather to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as a February room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for Composite Development's fly rods and fishing accessories. Tech, precision, ingenuity, legacy. Go to cdfishing.us and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's your host, Lauren Carnop, and this is the February Room.
Lauren's better half Justin here, and I'm on the horn with Dave McCoy of Emerald Water Anglers in Seattle. Dave, welcome to the February Room.
Woohoo! Thank you, Justin. Happy to be here, man.
You too. It's good to catch up. Here we were chewing it up a little before we started recording, and finally pieced together how we knew one another from back in the day.
Right.
Yeah, you had helped us out on an episode of Trout Unlimited on the Rise with Smethurst.
Yeah, everybody should go look that one up.
Right. You could probably find it out there on My Outdoor TV or something. So I might have to research and go.
I found it on YouTube.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, it was. I just typed in Frank's name in Olympic Peninsula, and it was the first thing that came up. So.
Well, there you go. That'll give me something to look forward to this afternoon.
The quality's terrible, but it's sitting there.
All right, good enough.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, you're a fly shop owner, a guide, a brand ambassador for several outfits, and have contributed a vast portfolio of photographs and articles to a laundry list of outdoor publications. But there's got to be a few stories yet untold. Could you spare one from the annals of Dave McCoy's personal book of adventure for us?
I probably can. I guess what I have to determine is what's going to be, what's not going to put February Room on the explicit list for podcast, and what's going to make people actually still listen even after I start with, like, well, I was trying to take a poop. Yeah.
You go, we're all ears.
Well, I get when I'm guiding, I get the question oftentimes of how I got into photography and what was the impetus for me running so quickly and so much fervor in that direction while guiding. And it actually happened on the Black Canyon one year when I was, it was salmon fly hatch, and this isn't a funny story at all. It's more insight into how I do what I do and the way I do it. But I was guiding this client that was, it always come down, and it was the second year I think that I'd guided him, and salmon flies were in full swing. He was throwing a big sofa pillow at the wall, and as he was casting, he was looking up and and not paying attention to his fly, and he misses a fish, and I'm like, lift. I'm like, God, I'm like, Jeff, come on, lift, man. And he's like, sorry, geez. I was like, hey, Dave, look at that cave up there. Do you think the Utes used to use that when they would stay in the canyon on their way through here? And I looked at him for a second, and I'm like, Jeff, I have no clue. Now lift. Like, you just missed another one. Come on. I'm like, oh, Christ. And he kind of chuckles for a second, and then he asked me another question about, look at those. Do you think that this is called Black Canyon because of the coloration of the rocks over there, and how old do you think that is? And if Frank's listening to this, he'll be disgusted because I didn't listen to any of the coaching he gave me when he was training me to guide him. But I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, here. He goes, well, do you have a beer in the cooler? I'm like, yeah, I got a couple of them. He's like, grab them, let's pull over. We need to have a chat. I'm like, okay. So we pull over, and he's like, Dave, do you know why I'm down here? I'm like, to fish, obviously. Salmon fly hatch. Everybody wants to be here right now. He's like, yeah, definitely here to fish. He's like, but do you really know why I'm here? I'm like, no, tell me. He's like, well, the fishing is the vehicle for me to be here, but I'm really here for the surroundings, for the company, for the sound of the water, for everything that surrounds these fish that we're trying to catch. I'm like, okay. He's like, may I make a suggestion to you as a guide? And I'm like, sure. He's like, you should know more about the geology and the history of this place, so that when I ask you questions as I'm fishing, I can focus on the fishing while I'm listening to you tell me about, regale me with the stories of what the Utes used to do in here and what time they were here and what the different, rock formations mean, and so on and so forth. He's like, and you should have a camera. You should be taking pictures of me down here so that at the holidays, you can send me a card with a photo that I haven't seen and say, hey, Jeff, looking forward to seeing you in June again. Because what's going to happen when you do that is I'm going to follow you anywhere you go. I'm going to want to fish with you everywhere that you're trying to go fish. And I can't obviously take pictures of myself while I'm fishing. So in order for me to fully enjoy the experience, he's like, be a better guide. I took a hard right turn with that suggestion and did that exact thing. I literally went home after that trip, stole my girlfriend's camera, wife now, but took her camera and started shooting pictures in there and started doing exactly that. And lo and behold, yeah, people wanted to fish with me all the time after I did that. So kind of a lesson learned as far as the history of how I got into guiding and where I've taken it since. So
interesting. So you took it to heart, and turns out he was kind of onto something.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. And the funny thing about it is, that was kind of pre-internet, so there wasn't really any way to share those photos, and there wasn't any way to really adorn people with them without actually printing the photos out still and mailing them in an envelope with a stamp. It took extra effort to do it, and yet it did lead to what I do now, which is, obviously, like you said, run my own photography company and use the images I shoot wherever I am to help promote the companies that I work for and the company that I own and the issues that our industry faces, and try to promote the better side of fly fishing as often as I can.
Well, yeah, and your client did you a service too there, because in guiding, there's so many things that are out of our control.
Yep.
The fishing, the skill of the angler. We can do our best to improve on that. But if you can offer, knowledge of the area, good food,
Yep,
safe passage, all those little things that can play into a day and make their memory for them. That's kind of what gets you through on a day-to-day basis, because obviously the fishing, the weather conditions, all that stuff is unpredictable and largely out of anybody's hands.
Yeah, I can't remember who told me about a bumper sticker that they saw the other day, but it was at another shop somewhere, and it said, I'm a guide, not God.
Yep. There you go.
I thought that was pretty funny.
I also like the one that says, if at first you don't succeed, listen to your guide.
Yeah, that's a good one. Or the one in New Zealand, if you're having trouble catching New Zealand trout, it's because you're not good enough yet.
Yeah, that's Kiwi logic. That's
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about emerald water anglers.
Yeah, so Black Canyon, myself and a few other guides were guiding the multi-day trips through the Black Canyon. And after a few years together, we were, T was guiding in Utah and going down south, down to South America, and Ian was doing South America and kind of the East Coast, and Troy and I was coming back to the Pacific Northwest, and Troy was sticking to Colorado for the most part, and we all just had these, discussions at night after clients would go to bed, and we'd be sitting on the beach, and about, clients would be asking, how can they get a hold of us? How can they know where we are when? All this stuff, and it sounds funny saying this because it makes complete sense, but I was like, well, what if we started a website with all of us on it, and where we fished, when, and had emails that people could reach out to us wherever we were, and we'd be able to answer the email from wherever in the world we were at that time. Like, duh, makes complete and utter sense. But again, this was like pre-cell phone almost, and definitely like right at the very beginning of the internet. And so kind of spawned that idea at night on an overnight trip, came back, talked to my girlfriend about it, and one of my other friends who was a web designer in the early days. And we were getting ready to move to Seattle anyway. And so my wife came up with the name, told our friend that was the web designer, and one day she had me come over and she built the first website for Emerald Water Anglers. And Seattle being the Emerald City, that was kind of the impetus for the name. And so that was literally kind of where it started. And then when we moved here, I was helping run the fly fishing shop at REI when they had one for about a year and a half, 2 years, and showing people the website on the floor computer as often as I could. And I'd go home at night and be super pumped because there was 11 visitors to the website that day.
Yeah.
You know, and got REI to give me 3 13-and-a-half-hour working days a week. So I had 4 days a week to guide and explore. The original intention was to work for a guide service here in Seattle, but there weren't any. Everybody was just an individual guide, and shops would refer clients to you if they liked you. We were literally the first guide service in Seattle as far as having gear to provide people, from waders and boots and rods and reels to providing hotel pickup and drop off to all the other things that basically were status quo for Rocky Mountain guide services to provide as far as a service. We were the first one in Seattle to do it, and it grew rather quickly, even considering the lack of internet, or the lack of use of the internet at the time. So it's been fun. It's been a crazy ride, been ups and downs, and still primarily the only one that really is a fly shop guide service in this area still. I mean, there's other shops obviously, and they have some guides and stuff, but we really are the one that's the most organized fly shop guide service combo in this region. So,
Well, that's awesome, man. Good on you.
yeah, it's crazy.
And you guys guide throughout the Seattle area and up into the peninsula.
Yeah, Peninsula is that season has usually just been kind of a January through March for us. And then we just hired a new guide that lives out there that is going to allow us to guide the peninsula through him all year now, because we get a ton of information, or a ton of people that ask about it during the summer, but it's just too long of a haul for us to do for day trips, because we basically stay within 2 hours of Seattle, and that's just too far to go. So having him out there is going to provide us the opportunity to guide the peninsula all year now, which is pretty exciting.
Oh, nice. So you have a peninsula-based guide now.
Yep.
Speaking of steelhead, so steelhead runs are kind of at critical mass here up and down the Pacific Northwest. What's the situation up in your neck?
Well, ironically, we just heard from DFW last night about rule changes for the Olympic Peninsula for this coming winter. I can read you a little bit of it.
Yeah, let's hear the greatest hits.
Yeah, so state announces changes to coastal steelhead recreational fishing season to meet conservation objectives while preserving angling opportunities. The restrictions will begin December 14th and are expected to last through April 30th and affect all sport fishing in coastal tributaries. Among the changes, fishing from a floating device prohibited.
Wow.
There you go. There's your big one.
Yep. Yep. There you go. All right.
There you go. That's the one that probably we can probably just end right there, because that's the one that's going to be the game changer.
Good for the swingers.
Yeah, it's. I know there's a lot of high fives going around about that. It's going to put just a lot of people on the bank. So
true.
Everybody. I mean, I've got a lot of mixed feelings about the Olympic Peninsula. And there's, different people have different views on what takes place out there and what the reasons are for the decline in fisheries. They're saying in here that the numbers have been declining for the last 4 years, and that they're expected to not reach escapement goals. My personal feeling is they should probably just close the whole damn thing, period. Or risk getting those fish ESA listed, at which point, if that happens, then the feds will end up having to close it. So right. People need to start kind of watching their P's and Q's on how they fish. The state, for whatever reason, has put themselves in a corner with regards to how they can manage or not manage guiding in our state. It's kind of a free-for-all. And it's pretty sad to see what's taking place out there as far as the number of guides from let's see, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho.
No Montanans at all.
No Montanans. No, zero. Colorado, Ohio, Michigan.
Jeez.
Where else have I seen a couple of guides from? So, I mean, they come from everywhere, and our industry has done this fabulous job of propping this place up as this unbelievable fishery. And at one point it really actually was, but with the state doing nothing to really manage the amount of traffic on it, we've kind of kicked it in the nuts a little bit, even a lot.
Made it a bit of a hornet's nest.
Yeah, I mean, we've done it a considerable disservice in shitty management. So, this is one step in the direction of what I believe will be probably closures coming in the next few years if things don't change. So we'll see.
Yeah. I hope that doesn't happen. I mean, no matter which fishery you pick, the Clearwater, your coastal streams, the Oregon coastal streams, there's issues up and down throughout the range. And, they're so daunting, and it's such a massive problem. But as anglers, we all have to be aware that we're fishing for a dying breed here, so yep. We have to approach it tread very lightly.
It just kind of amazes me that with other states and other regulations on other rivers, that it has been so difficult for Washington to follow suit. It's not like we need to reinvent a wheel with regards to managing angling pressure. Permits, not fishing from floating devices, that's nothing new, for crying out loud. The Deschutes doesn't let you do that,
Right.
There's so many things that we could have done better and that already existed as far as regulations in other parts of the country and the world on trophy waters, if you will. I hate the word
right.
trophy, but you get the point. And we just never did it. It had to become a reactionary move as opposed to a preservation move. And that just really sucks, man. I'm bummed about it.
Yeah, that's a shame, man. I've never fished the Olympic Peninsula, and had plans to go up there this spring, but those are obviously in flux for a number of reasons. So yeah, may never get a chance to see it, but hopefully,
well, I hope you do.
A silver lining. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll get our poop in a group and get it all figured out, and Mother Nature will throw us a bone, and here 10 years from now, we'll be swinging flies with no one else around. How would that be?
Yeah, that sounds terrific. It doesn't sound very likely, but it sounds
riding unicorns into the river.
Right. That's right. It's pretty fascinating to think about all of that. I mean, my God, the number of people that guide in this state now, because the regulations are just so easy to guide here, it's astounding.
Wow, I didn't realize that it was as wide open as it was.
Yeah, I remember when I started guiding here, even over on like the Yakima for trout, it's like people fly into Washington on a clear blue day, and they see the amount of water that we have at our fingertips here. And if they fly fish and don't have a lot of awareness of the difference in what we are versus Montana, let's say, they believe they just flew into Shangri-La and that we're Montana on steroids. We've got more water at our disposal than you could even fathom, right? But this is anadromous fish country, not resident trout country. So we don't have those Montana-esque, Rocky Mountain-esque trout rivers. We just don't have them. The Yakima is the closest thing that we get, and it's just okay if you compared it to 20 or 30 other rivers in the Rocky Mountains from north to south. So when I started here, there was a couple other guide services on the Yakima and a few individual guides. There really wasn't that many people guiding. There are now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 6 fairly sizable guide services that I can just thinking of off the top of my head, and a litany of just individual guides out there.
Right.
I mean, it's the number of people guiding on that river has in 20 years has probably quintupled at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
Sounds like you guys have somewhat of a magnified issue based on the lax regulations that are in place around guiding.
And one river to guide.
Yeah, right.
One river to guide
That doesn't help
all year for trout.
That doesn't help. But yeah, I don't know when the last time you came over here and fished during like the salmon fly hatch or something. But we're kind of at the saturation point around here too, in my opinion, as far as guiding goes.
That's kind of what I've been hearing. Yeah, that's what I've heard. I haven't been over there for salmon fly in a long time, probably 15, 16 years, but I was over there late September, early October, and or mid-October, something like that, and was pretty amazed at how busy it was even then. Like, wow, okay.
Yeah, because there used to be nobody hardly on the waters once like hunting season started.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's not the case anymore.
Crazy stuff.
So you're from Colorado originally, right, Dave?
No, I actually grew up in Eugene, Oregon.
Oh, you did? Okay, yep. Fellow Oregon boy.
Yep.
Huh. Okay, fair enough. So, so then I imagine you probably grew up steelhead fishing in Oregon,
yep.
And then located to the Rockies, and then moved back out to steelhead country.
Yep. I ski race coaching took me to Colorado, and steelhead fishing brought me back to the Pacific Northwest.
Well, I'll be danged. We have led somewhat parallel lives. Yeah, I was a ski coach here in Missoula for a while.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah.
Well, that's hilarious. We probably ran into each other on the slopes.
We probably have, man. I grew up racing at Mount Bachelor. Yeah.
Was Nils coach?
Nils was my coach.
That's
Nils
awesome.
was my coach. Yep. Nils is now the soccer coach at Bend High. My sister's the cross country coach there. So yeah, he's still around.
Oh yeah. And Fred Schick.
Fred Schick, man, a legend, the Copenhagen King.
Oh my God. I love Fred.
Yep. Me too, man. Who doesn't? That guy's great.
Yeah. I worked for the MBSCF for a little bit, and then coached up at Mount Hood for a while, and then ended up down in Colorado.
I'll be danged. Well, I'm sure we could sit here and
that's a whole other podcast.
Go the whole other podcast and go mutual friend for mutual friend all night.
Right. That's fantastic, man.
Wow, that's awesome. So steelhead, what is it about steelhead that draws you to fishing for them? Because they're a grind. I mean, it's not a numbers game. I mean, I'm sure like you, I have gone a season without hooking a winter fish. Yet I still yearn for the next time I can get out and do it. So what is it about steelhead fishing that attracts you?
Man, I think you said it right there. It's not a numbers game. somewhere in the path of starting to fly fish when I was 2.5 or 3 to now. And the people that influenced me, whether it was directly or indirectly, I just came to this place where I don't necessarily care about catching the fish, but I will thoroughly enjoy that result if the way I've done it suits exactly how I want to do it, if that makes sense. So
Yep, it makes sense to me.
spay casting is something that I've been in love with since moving up here. I bought my first spay rod from Scott Fly Rods in '96, I believe. And there's just something about spay casting and swinging flies that makes that journey between fish an unknown. And I really do enjoy the adventure that our sport brings to the table. And by swinging and not knowing if you're going to get a fish in that way or not is something that keeps you alive and on point. And there really is nothing like those little fly tickles you get when the fish is entertaining the idea of slamming it, and you can feel all of that through the swing. And I think that as a fly angler who's always trying to better his game, when you address the water on a swung fly, you are reading it for a different presentation than what most fly anglers are taught, how most fly anglers are taught to read water. And so therefore I think you become more in tune with it. You become a better fly angler through that process, and you just understand water in a whole new way. And I absolutely love that. It's what gets me up in the morning.
Right. And you also pick up an arsenal of casts that you can apply to any fishing situation.
Without question.
I learned to spay cast from Charles St. Pierre back in the late 90s. And at first I didn't quite get it. I thought, because he had me on a learning tool, it was like a 14-foot 8, and we were swinging for, 6-7 pound A-run fish on the Deschutes. And I struggled with it at first too, because I'm really predominantly right-handed, and I just couldn't quite coordinate everything very well. So it was somewhat frustrating. And
it didn't have anything to do with the fact that the head was like 55 feet long or anything like that.
Yeah, right. Throwing one of those mid spays or something, right? Yeah, no doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt. Well, now looking back, it's so funny you say that, because now you can line somebody up with a Skagit head and have them, covering water in a couple of hours. But
oh my God,
yeah, the learning curve back then was tough, and it was a frustrating. It was a frustrating trip for me. So I kind of went away from it, and I learned those casts with a single-handed rod.
There you go.
And then once I, got back to it, and I go fish with John Hazlett and follow him through runs and watch him. And then, it all kind of came together. And once it and I'm not a great spay caster by any means, but once you can get to a point where you feel like you're covering water and most of your casts are landing where you want them and everything, then it's just a blast.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny watching the pendulum swing a little bit. Those of us that swing exclusively, we've gone through this whole evolution of 60 plus foot heads all the way down to 17-foot heads, and now we've got this resurgence of longer rods with longer bellied lines. And like we sell bridge fly lines from Tim Arsenault who lives in BC, and I can't keep them in stock.
Huh.
There's just this flood of people coming back to wanting to throw, 40 to 55 foot heads again. And I think it's awesome.
Well, that's good. And that's good from a retailer standpoint, because now you got a whole new surge you can focus on.
That, and if you're going to truly learn a skill, like, let's learn it. I understand making it easier, but when you make it so easy that you literally are not helping the person that's learning become a better angler because you've made it too easy. And then they get in a situation where they either want to try something longer and they come to it with this big head and this ego about how great a spay caster they are, and then they just get fully humbled. I'm okay with that too, but I'd rather just have people learn how to spay cast well in the very beginning.
Right.
So at least like start on some Scandi heads or something like that gives you a little bit of length and makes you actually place your anchors and stuff a little bit more consciously, as opposed to just being able to lift your rod, swing it around and throw and have it magically just go 80 feet.
Duck and throw.
Yeah. That's another podcast. We'll have to delve into that.
Sure. So tell me a little about the global travel program you guys do.
Yeah. I like traveling. I love seeing the world. So, when we started funny enough, it goes back to when I started Emerald Water Anglers, we had, started to have some of our clients reach out to us about, things. They'd be like, so I remember on the river, you said that you'd been to the Bahamas, where, and, who'd you fish with and how do I get a hold of them? And so I was like, I was giving, I was pointing out to people who to fish with, like Philip Raleigh and North Andros and stuff like that. And I think it was Phil one day said to me, he's like, if we just kind of make this more of a professional relationship, I'm happy to pay a commission for all the referrals you keep sending me. And light bulb went off in my head and I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. So that just, that became a little bit of a supplemental income to the guiding. And I never really wanted to open a fly shop. I was fairly adamant about not doing that when I moved here, but it just all led that direction because you start seeing as a guide all the people that are passing through your doors or passing, through you, and because you don't sell anything, they end up at another shop buying stuff. And I kept track of it one year, and I figured I'd probably left $250,000 worth of sales on the table in a year through all the lessons and everything I'd taught. And so, so the travel, the photography really drove that too. I really wanted to start providing more images to stories and articles I was writing, and I wanted to see new places. I love, people always ask, what's your favorite place that you've ever fished? And my canned answer is the place I've never been.
Right. So
47 countries in the last probably 9 years. And
wow.
Yeah, I still have not made much of a dent in my list.
Dang, you got a broad list, man.
Yeah. I've got a bad disease is what it turns out to be.
You do. You have a real problem.
Yeah. And more cowbell's not going to solve it.
Well, cool. Well, I know you get over here occasionally to fish with the likes of Van de Grift or Greg Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Next time I'm going to have to get in touch with you there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to, maybe I can come run your guys' shuttle for you or something.
There you go. Or just fish with us, for crying out loud.
That'd be great, man. Yeah, make you some crepes and yeah, we could.
That sounds fabulous.
Well, awesome, man. Do you got another yarn for us before we cut you loose?
Yeah, I was thinking about one. I did this overnight trip with some guys, and they were on it to do more drinking than fishing.
Were they Montanans?
No, they were Washingtonians. They were Wild Westerners, and but they stirred the proverbial soup with beer before wine, before brown water, before clear water, they just put it all in the same bucket. So yeah, exactly. It was a huge ouch. So we were just telling stories and laughing and just cracking up. We were sitting in front of the campsite in the boat. We hadn't even gotten out of the boat. I just all of a sudden noticed, I'm like, oh my God, it's almost dark. Like, I haven't unloaded the boat. I still have to make dinner. I need to set up camp. And when I stepped out of the boat, I hooked my shoelace on the oar lock and went like face down in the gravel. And they just started laughing so hard it wasn't even funny. And so I was a little embarrassed, a little pissed at myself for just totally losing it. So I took their Paco pads, I unrolled them and just threw them on the gravel and said, "All right, camp's made." And went over, set a table up, cooked, and I'm positive of this, cooked maybe my greatest filet mignon on a camp stove ever.
Ooh.
It tasted so good. It might have had something to do with the incredible amount of libation that my body was still hosting, that I thought it was that great. But I thought it was great. And
know your audience too. I mean,
yeah, exactly. And they thought it was great. And so so we opened one more bottle of wine, and that was kind of the last thing I remember. So then in the middle of the night, I wake up and I've got to go to the bathroom really bad. And I'm a little disoriented. I'm sleeping on half on my Paco pad, half on the rocks, and still in my waders. And I've got to go bad. And I hadn't set up the porta potty either. And so, or the groover. And I'm like, and this is not going to give me the time to do it. So I kind of in a haze running around, trying not to fall in the river. And there's a log sitting on the bank. So I go over and I get my waders down and I sit myself on this log and hang my butt off the backside and just let it go. And you know how you get that flush of like, almost like somebody threw a bucket of cold water on you when you let one of those go in the morning? And
no, nothing about it.
Okay, well, I could go into more detail, but I won't. So I'm sitting there and I'm relaxing in a way I hadn't relaxed, obviously, in a few hours because of harboring that fugitive. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, now I've got a problem. Now I've forgot to grab TP and I don't even know where it is. And I'm sitting over here, the boat's over there. What the hell am I going to do? And so I think about it for a second and I go to stand up and my shoulder strap from my waders somehow had fallen on the back side of the log and hooked on a broken off branch. And so I stood up with enough momentum that I kind of had a little bit of recoil in the flexible strap, and it pulled me back down onto the log, and I rolled off the log backwards.
Uh-oh.
Which at that point, my belt had hooked on a branch on the front of the log, and I was stuck. I couldn't get up. So I'm sitting there on this log, feet over the front of it, on my shoulders, trying not to land in my repository, and screaming at the top of my lungs to try to get Brad and Carl to frickin' wake up and come help me. And it just wasn't going to happen. So I'm like literally sitting there with my head and my shoulders, arms straight up in the air, knowing right where I can feel the warmth of it kind of up against the small of my back. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like trying to twist out of it, try to get I have my wading boots on, so I can't take my waders off. And finally I just exhaust myself and I just have to fall flat into it. It's just, there was just no other choice. And do you know how hard it is to wipe the middle of your back off? So I tried, it didn't work. So I just pulled my waders back up, went and laid back down on my Paco pad, and woke up in the morning and jet boat goes rolling by and slows down in front of us. And all I can hear is the guide on the boat going, "What the happened there?" And then the rest of the guys on the boat just laughing their asses off at us. It looked a little bit like a murder scene, I think, with the way we were spread out on on the beach and stuff. So, not my finer moment.
Oh man! All right, mercy,
They
man.
exist. And I've got this thing about poop. I think it's funny. So most of my stories involve poop in one form or another.
Oh, I give up. Oh, that was something else.
I wish we'd have done this in a video format so I could have showed you what that really looked like.
Right? Yeah, maybe a cartoon or something.
Yeah. If I had any degree of ability to draw, I would totally draw that.
An animation really would tell the story. Well, Dave, the real McCoy, man, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for the invite. It was a pleasure. Great talking to you again. And yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.